I'd love to start with your journey. What inspired you to create Mo News, and how did your background in mainstream media kind of shape your approach to reporting?
So what's interesting about Mo News is I wasn't intending to start like my own thing. It was effectively an exercise during early weeks of COVID to inform a couple hundred friends and family of what was going on. So background on me, I spent a number of years, I mean, going back to like I wanted to start a middle school newspaper. I was always been into journalism. I was in my high school newspaper. I was part of my college newspaper. Did a bunch of TV internships. Eventually, get a job at Fox News. Was at Fox News for a number of years as a producer and reporter out of Washington. Then was at Bloomberg TV. Then was at CBS for a decade. And frankly, needed a break from the day-to-day grind of news. So left in the summer of 2019, looking to go do documentary work or something different that wasn't part of the daily news cycle. And then 6 months later, COVID hits. And my friends and family are all like, Moshe, you're the news guy. Like, what is happening? Like, what do I need to do? Is the world ending? And so, as opposed to texting them back individually, I was like, you know what? Just follow my Instagram feed. I'll watch Fauci. I'll watch Trump. I'll watch whatever's going on, and curate and aggregate. I think reliable sources when it came to COVID coverage. So that really was the beginning of it, which was I was a trusted person in the lives of my friends and family. And little did I realize that this would be a useful account for many more people. And so within a few weeks, I'm at 1,000, then 10,000, then 50,000. Then like celebrities start following me, like Nick and Joe Jonas, and a bunch of other folks from America and around the world, politicians, and realized that I had stumbled upon my next thing, which we would then call Mo News, a platform where you can get reliable information. It was initially social media first, and still is really on Instagram, but we have now built it out into a daily podcast and daily newsletter. I try to ensure that we cover every story fairly, and that we provide multiple perspectives. And that really, interestingly is unique in this day and age where everyone has sort of picked a team.
I'd love to go back to your college days for a moment. I know you studied political communication and security policy at GW, and you also mentioned that you were the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. What was that experience like? And how did your time in college kind of shape your understanding of media, responsibility, and using your voice?
Well, what's notable is GW is a very unique campus. Its location in particular is just a few blocks from the White House, a few blocks from the State Department. So covering issues on campus sort of a microcosm of what's happening nationally. I mean, literally, I remember covering like our student government, and we were having impeachment proceedings against the student body president. I mean, basically, whatever was happening in the real world down the street on Capitol Hill, somehow as college students, we were mimicking in some way, shape, or form. So, found GW to be a really interesting place. It's funny now, 20 years later, a number of the my classmates have gone on to do some really interesting things, working for multiple presidential candidates, multiple presidents. Several are now members of Congress. And so, you realize on a campus like that, politics is central, both domestic and international. I was there, among other things that I covered, in addition to campus politics, international events. GW was sort of unique in this way 20 years ago. Now, international events, sort of as you have experienced, have become big issues on multiple campuses. But back then was the Second Intifada in the early 2000s. And so watched sort of how the politics of the Middle East translated on campus, and, got my start covering those issues as a campus reporter. And I would say one of the more notable things I got to cover as a campus newspaper reporter was 9/11. That was beginning of my sophomore year. The attack happened actually the first day of my internship on Capitol Hill, got back to campus and got to cover it for students across the country. My stories appeared in multiple campus newspapers, and the aftermath of what took place on 9/11 and in the months and years afterward was another storyline that we closely followed on campus. But I think that as a journalist, I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for my experience working on the college newspaper. It taught me a lot of lessons. It allowed me to really, hone my writing skills, my interviewing skills, and so I'm very grateful for it.
That's great to hear. I know you've spoken a little bit about the firehouse of misinformation, especially during the Israel-Hamas war. How do you balance speed and accuracy when reporting breaking news, especially with regards to this current conflict?
I have always worked by the adage and told folks on my teams, whether I worked at Bloomberg or CBS or now at Mo News, that it's more important to be right than first. No one will remember whether you were first on a story if you were right. They'll remember if you were first on a story if you were wrong. And so I think it's super important to keep in mind that even though there's a lot of pressure these days with social media, and it feels like, well, I'm hearing this from multiple places, and I'll hear this from the audience sometimes. I was like, well, I'm not reporting this until I have reliable information that this is actually what took place from sometimes more than one source, especially if that one source is not that reliable. So, I think it's super important these days in the world of misinformation to take a beat, to take a second, because sometimes people are very keen on reporting things or resharing things, I should say, if they are things that reinforce their worldview or are very much against their worldview. So if it's like, oh my God, yeah, of course this happened. Let me tell the world about it. Well, have you verified it? Have you taken a second? Have you read the caption? Have you done a Google or a YouTube search to see if like this is out of context or even happened in the place they say it happened? And the same thing for something that like reinforces your views about someone or something or someplace that you hate. Can you believe they did this? Well, did they do that? And so I think that that's something that even with the pressures of being on social media, seeing stuff in multiple places, if it comes from a source that I haven't heard of before, or even from a source I have heard of before, but they're the only ones saying it, I'm going to take a second. And I think it's important. And I think that's what people have come to trust when it comes to our coverage of Mo News is that like if we put it up, we will have made a point of trying to get something right.
Yeah, that's one thing I love about Mo News, and Mo News has definitely been a reliable source of information for me. So when it comes to social media, we actually recently polled students for the OCU Chronicle, and every single respondent said they get some or all of their news from social media. As someone who's built a trusted platform on these apps, how do you think this shift has kind of shaped perceptions of the Israel-Palestine conflict and other geopolitical issues? And what advice do you have for young people that are trying to tell the difference between honest reporting and misinformation online?
I think that social media is an incredible resource for information, and I think it is also an incredible mess sometimes to navigate through. Not all social media accounts are created equal. Not all, even accounts with people who have some journalism background are created equal. Some people are very clear about their agenda. Some people very much are trying to hide their agenda or claiming that they have no agenda at all, when if you look at their coverage, they clearly do. So I think it requires all of us to be very savvy consumers, not assume anything. Again, look to see if a piece of information, photo, video, is available in more than one place from multiple sources, or it's just one account put something out and everyone is just resharing that one particular image. So we really have to scrutinize the information. And again, oftentimes you will see stuff on social media hours or sometimes days before you see it in mainstream media. And that's where social media is incredibly helpful. But sometimes the stuff on social media never appears in mainstream media, partially because that never happened or it's completely out of context, right? And so I think uh, it is important to follow accounts from a variety of perspectives that you disagree with, even perspectives that make you angry at times, to give you a sense for like, well, there's I have a bubble of people who agree with me on most things in the world, but like there's a lot of people who disagree. I wonder why they disagree. That's where I think social media can be incredibly useful. I think that you should verify like who's putting stuff out. There's a lot of people who call themselves independent journalists or citizen journalists who have no journalism background whatsoever, right? And I'm not saying there's something wrong with that, but it should lead you to ask more questions about how they're verifying the information that they're putting out there. So I think that again, social media super helpful, but it requires all of us these days not to just take one account's word for something, but dive deeper and do our homework.
Yeah, I totally agree. So your recent documentary after the war in Gaza featured deeply human stories, and I really enjoyed watching the documentary. What did you learn from that experience, and did it at all change the way you see the current conflict?
So that's a documentary that we actually shot about 4.5 months after October 7th. And now we're sitting here, obviously, 19 months later. And there are certain things that have sort of um, evolved since then, and certain things that haven't changed at all. Now, I'm very lucky as somebody who has traveled to Israel extensively throughout my life. I have family there. And so I feel like I have a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the conflict. And that was a bit of what I was trying to present in the documentary, is that things for ease, for simplicity, are presented very black or white, often in the US through a lens, through an American lens, when in fact, as we know, things are not so simple there. Um, and oftentimes, and this is something we try to reinforce to people all the time, people are not their leaders. Countries are not their leaders. In the same way, whether you agree with Trump or disagree with Trump, you wouldn't want the whole world to see the United States of America and the 350 million people who live here through the eyes of how they view the leader of the country. And it's the same way that I think we need to view the Middle East. Israelis are not Netanyahu. All Palestinians are not Hamas, and so on and so forth. And that was a bit of the nuance we tried to bring to the conflict, is tried to give people viewpoints, tried to talk to people who are experts, who've been steeped in these issues, who are willing to be self-critical. And that's key, right? I mean, so many people are activists, and there's a place for activists. But ultimately, what I think is super helpful is getting the perspective of people who are like, yeah, like this is what I believe, but like, yeah, our side, messed this up or messed that up, or like there's a way to approach this. And those are some of the voices that I tried to bring up. I also, talked to two Arab Israelis, Palestinian Israelis, who are citizens of Israel, have grown up in Israel and have their own very complicated feelings about the country, about both sides, and even like what's evolved in the war, for more than a year now since we shot that, has probably changed those viewpoints. But I think that whether you're looking at the conflict in the Middle East or looking at the conflict in Ukraine or looking at Iran or looking at North Korea or China or whatever country you're looking at across the world, or frankly, even here in the US, I mean, think about someone coming in to do a documentary about what's going on in the U.S. right now in regards to what's happening on campuses or immigration or abortion, or just pick your issue in the U.S., right? Well, there's a lot of viewpoints, right? It's not as simple as what the leader says about stuff. And so that's a bit of what we tried to do there. And I think it's super important as people approach that particular conflict, but really all conflicts around the world, that they try to take a moment to listen to voices from those places who actually have lived experience there, as opposed to activists here in America.
Yeah, I think you bring up such a good point about listening to both sides. In your conversation with Khalil Sayer, a Palestinian from Gaza, you really modeled civil, nuanced dialogue in such a beautiful way. And I wonder what advice you have for students who want to engage in that kind of dialogue at a time where campuses feel really hostile and those conversations can be hard to have.
I mean, listen, at the end of the day, not everyone is capable of that right now, right? I think the best you can do is try and understand that some people are fully able to actually engage in a nuanced conversation. And some people have decided one side is bad, one side is good, one side is evil. There is no negotiation. And that's, the situation. I do think that there are certain, elements that make us all human, right? We all have our experiences, we all have our traumas, and we all have our stories. And I think the super important thing, and you brought up the conversation with Khalil, who's from the small Christian community inside Gaza, who was talking about, one thing that still strikes me is that, like, as we think about why one side hates another, why people grow up to be certain or believe certain things, his first experience meeting a Jew, meeting an Israeli, happened in his 20s. In Gaza, his only experience with Israel was like seeing fighter jets bomb things, and hearing about the conflict. That's his only experience. He never had a human interaction with an Israeli. So how can he see them as humans if he doesn't actually see that? Like, oh, you have kids and you have a mother and you have a job and like, what do you want? What do you want out of life, right? And I think, that cuts across everyone, which is like, if you can't see or you literally don't meet the other side, you're not going to think of them as human. And so I think that when it comes to conversations, and by the way, that's like in the conflict zone. On college campuses, it's like in many cases, most of us are Americans, right? From the same place. In many cases, maybe neither side who are protesting against each other have been to the region or only to the region once, but there's a lot of room for dialogue and there's a lot of room for questions of why before you attack or before you try to prove someone wrong. Why do you think that? Where did you learn that? Um, what do you think the solution should be? Do you think that's realistic? How would it feel if, you were this person? I think, again, some people understandably are very emotional about these issues. Understand, right? Some people might be directly impacted, might have had friends or family die or injured in the conflict. But I think beginning from a place of curiosity.
We need to kind of have these conversations in a curious way, and in a setting that's more conducive to them.
Right, at the end of
Um,
the day, like the encampment itself is like that is already like a situation that makes dialogue more challenging, right? Because people have like, they're already trying to prove a point where they're there. Everyone's trying to create a social media moment. And so people come from a place of like, a lot of skepticism. But I hear you.
I want to close out with one last question. If you could go back and give your college self any advice, what would that advice be?
I would say, well, number one, enjoy college a little more. Things are going to work out for you professionally. Um, and so, like, enjoy being a student because you'll never get that back. And work is for the rest of your life. So anyway, that's a personal piece of advice I would give myself. Not to say that people should like be cutting class and like, drinking every night or whatever people are doing these days. But my point is enjoy the unique privilege of being a college student and what it enables you to do and you just get to like take ideally courses and subject matter that may not be directly relevant to your professional pursuit but just help educate you about interesting things. I would also tell young Mosh take more classes in economics and business because that is super useful for both understanding the world but also understanding your own personal finances, and so that's an aside. I always try to tell college students like economics, this what makes the world go round and would honestly make my coverage of tariffs much easier these days. And, beyond that, I think, college is all about having the opportunity to meet people from places that you wouldn't ordinarily meet them from, get diverse experiences. And it really depends on the campus, but ultimately, I think, that's one of the great things about college campuses where in the real world, outside of campus, like it's much harder to have those interactions. You're working or this, like you might end up like finding a group of people that are similar to you. And so I think the diversity of college campuses and enjoying that diversity and getting those experiences, super helpful. And I would also say that like, keep up those relationships. I was at a conference and I ran into a guy I was in the same freshman dorm as 20 years ago, and he's now running like some huge tech company, and I had no idea. And he's like, Mosh, I'm like, oh my God. Like, and I hadn't seen him since like freshman year of college. So I think, maintaining those relationships, you never know where these people are going to end up. And that's super cool. So those are a few pieces of advice.
Thank you so much. Everything you shared is so valuable, and I'm so excited for the world to hear all of these perspectives and really, really appreciate you for being a part of the OCU Chronicle. So thank you. Thank you.
I'm wishing you a lot of luck with it, and let me know if there's anything I can do for you guys.